There is a philosophical concept so terrifying that Jean-Paul Sartre buried it inside a play most people never finish. Not a horror film, and not a thriller, a play set in a room with no exit, three people, no windows, no sleep, just each other forever. And the most chilling line ever written in the French language, L'enfer, c'est les autres. Hell is other people. Sartre published it in 1944. Sam Levinson filmed it in 2019 and called it Euphoria. Let's be honest about what Euphoria actually is. It is not a show about drugs. It is not a cautionary tale about teenagers making bad decisions. Every generation has had that show. Every generation has ignored it. Euphoria is something stranger and more precise than that. It is a show about what happens when someone becomes so aware of their own freedom that it destroys them. Zendaya plays Rue Bennett, a 17-year-old recovering addict who has the peculiar misfortune of being smarter than her circumstances. She sees herself with devastating clarity. She sees the people around her with devastating clarity. She narrates her own collapse in real time, with the detached precision of someone who understands exactly what she is doing and cannot stop. That is not a character flaw. That is a philosophical condition. Sartre had a name for it. Jean-Paul Sartre was born in Paris in 1905, lost his father at 15 months, and spent the rest of his life working through the implications of being alive without a predetermined reason for it. He was small, cross-eyed, and so relentlessly brilliant that his teachers at the École Normale Supérieure ran out of ways to grade him. He would go on to win the Nobel Prize for Literature and then refuse it, on the grounds that accepting prizes was itself a form of bad faith. We will get to bad faith. It is the entire point. Sartre's central argument, the one that runs through everything from being and nothingness to no exit, is this: human beings are condemned to be free, not blessed, not privileged, condemned. Because freedom, in Sartre's framework, is not a gift, it is a burden you cannot put down. Every moment of every day, you are choosing who you are. You cannot blame your past, your parents, your circumstances, your addiction. You are always, at every second, making a choice. And that choice defines you. This is either the most liberating idea in the history of philosophy or the most exhausting one. Depending on the day, it is probably both. Now, bad faith. Bad faith, mauvaise foi, is what Sartre called the human tendency to pretend we have less freedom than we actually do. The waiter who performs being a waiter so completely that he forgets he chose the job. The soldier who follows orders because he tells himself he had no choice. The person who stays in a relationship, a city, a life they hate because they have convinced themselves that leaving is impossible. Bad faith is the lie we tell ourselves to avoid the terror of our own freedom, and Rue Bennett is drowning in it. Watch how she narrates her own story. Watch how she frames her addiction, not as a choice she keeps making, but as something that happens to her, something she was born into, something the universe handed her, something that is simply the shape of her existence. She is not wrong. The pain is real. The chemistry is real. The grief is real. But Sartre would look at Rue and say, "You are lying to yourself about how much agency you have, not to excuse the addiction, to insist that you are still, always, a person with choices." That is an uncomfortable thing to say to someone in crisis. Sartre was famously not interested in comfortable. And then there's The Room. No exit, Huis clos in French, is the play where three people are trapped together after death. They expect torture. They get each other. The torture is the watching, the being watched, the way each person needs the others to confirm who they are, and how the others always get it wrong. Hell is not fire and brimstone. Hell is needing someone else to tell you who you are, and finding out they never can. Look at Rue and Jules. Rue's entire sense of self in season 1 and 2 is organized around Jules, around what Jules sees when she looks at her, When Jules leaves, Rue doesn't just lose a girlfriend, she loses the mirror she was using to understand herself. She loses the external confirmation that she exists in a particular way. That is, no exit. That is the room. Not a dramatic metaphor, a precise philosophical description of what Rue is experiencing. Sartre spent his whole career arguing that this is the trap. The moment you outsource your identity to another person's gaze, the moment you need their confirmation to feel real, you have handed them a power over you that no one can safely hold. Jules didn't do anything wrong. The architecture was always going to fail. Season 3 does something Sartre would find genuinely interesting. The official logline describes it as characters wrestling with the virtue of faith, the possibility of redemption, and the problem of evil. That is Sartrean territory, because Sartre's answer to bad faith, the answer he spent his whole life building toward, was not optimism, it was not therapy. His answer was authenticity. Authenticity, for Sartre, means accepting the full weight of your freedom, acknowledging that you are choosing, stopping the lie that you have no options, and then living in a way that owns those choices completely. Rue's arc across 3 seasons is not a story about whether she gets clean. It is a story about whether she can stop performing her own destruction and start choosing something else. Not because anyone told her to, not because she found love or God or a 12-step program, because she, specifically, in all her particular mess and brilliance, decided to. That is the Sartrean redemption arc. It does not look like the Hollywood version. It looks harder, slower, more contingent, and far more real. Sartre died in 1980 in Paris, surrounded by the remains of a lifetime of arguing that the world had no inherent meaning, and that this was, paradoxically, the most hopeful possible news. He never saw Euphoria, but I think he would have recognized Rue immediately. Not as a cautionary tale, not as a tragedy, but as the most honest portrait of what existential freedom actually looks like when it lands in a 17-year-old's body with no instruction manual. Brilliant, paralyzed, completely aware, and still somehow choosing. Euphoria is not a show about drugs. It is not a show about teenagers. It is a show about what Sartre called the fundamental human project, the terrifying, ongoing, impossible, necessary project of deciding to exist on your own terms. Rue Bennett is not failing that project. She is living it, in real time, in front of everyone, which is, depending on your philosophy, either a disaster or the bravest thing on television. Thank you for being here. It genuinely means the world. See you in the next one.